Okay. Well, let's think of something to talk about. I was thinking, so we'll be here for an hour. Let's focus. I think we're going to see what we can talk about and see if there's some tools we can take from this. Even if it's 1% of what you hear, it seems useful. That's great. You can be a 1% Buddhist, no problem. And as we know, much of Buddhist psychology is nothing to do with religion. It's practical, he's quite brilliant at the mind. So I think the thing is, we talk about the wisdom wing and we talk about the compassion wing. The wisdom wing is really like the retreat mode. The wisdom wing is all the work you do on yourself. And really the ideal scenario is to do it in isolation. It's really obvious. In other words, you go have your own practice in your own room on your own piano. That's the wisdom wing. And then you go, then you do it in front of people. You can't do both at once. It's too difficult. So the compassion wing is when you're around other people. So if you haven't done much work on your own mind on your own and made a few decisions about controlling your body and controlling your speech, forget about even looking at your mind. It's not possible to do it properly when you're in the midst of everybody else. That's why you have to have the wisdom wings, like practice. That's like practice, and you got to do practice on your own. It's a really interesting point. This is why most people go crazy. Most people never have time on their own. We think it's mental illness in the West. We think you've got to be autistic to want to have time on your own. We think you exist only in relation to others. So I was thinking, if you don't have time on your own, you're really asking for trouble. And of course, most of us aren't rich. Most of us don't have much real estate. And it's not a joke when I always quote, there's a kind of, it's said that something like 40% of all women who get murdered on the planet, get murdered by the bloke in the same bed. I mean, it's not about feminism. That's not about sexism. It's about the mind, because we don't even recognize we need space, And I think the one about children. I mean, in our family, there were 7 kids, right? My mother and dad, had 7 children, and eight children actually in 9 years or something, 9.5 years. My mother never had a period in 10 years. She had 8 babies, right? And she started when she was 34. So she was kind of, the thing was though, we were poor. We never had enough money. And we ended up, by the time the 7th baby came, we had to share beds, 2 bedrooms for 7 of us, which is, and we had to share beds. So we're all intense. We all speak, my brother's the kind of the most low key one, and he's the 8th in the family. There's 7 older sisters. We're all kind of speedy and bossy. So it was kind of intense being around each other. But, we talk about, they're the children. So we see all these little people and we think they're all the same. But I mean, every single one is a completely different human being. So we didn't have the luxury. Our family didn't have the luxury of 7 bedrooms and, 7 nannies to give, and then the mother to give time to each child that they needed. That's like a miracle. Even having 2 children must be tough. And we all know children are completely different human beings, because when they get older, we see them, they're 2 completely different human beings. But we tend to think this group is called the children, put all the children together. It's insanity. It's a miracle we all survive, I know, I mean, as a child for me, because I was such a bully and such a bully and loud and shouting, and 2 of my sisters got asthma. So I used to put pillows on Judy, and I had to share the bed with Judy and Julie, the asthmatics. I put pillows on their heads because I couldn't sleep. I mean, of course, I was cruel, but we're all there, poor little 7 things, all because one died when she was a wee baby. We were struggling to survive, struggling to find our own space. We all had our own methods, Polly became catatonic, and Janet became anorexic, and Julie and Judy got asthma and married. Tony just kind of stayed at the end of the family quietly. And every one of us had our different methods for dealing with being human beings living together in this house, So it's interesting, the Buddhist view would talk about the mind is the main thing. It's true, it is. But you've got to have space. You've got to control the servants of your mind first. You've got to control your body and speech first, otherwise you'll kill each other. Then you need the time to see your mind. It's too late to look at your mind while you're in the midst of a fight with your sister. So all I know is I was a naughty girl, right? I was also religious. I can never quite work out. I seem to be religious, a saint and a sinner at the same time. But anyway, I know because I was so naughty. And when I was about 12 or 13, I think I told this story. I was walking down the street. I'd stolen my mother's high heels and her earrings and her lippy. And I was kind of walking up and down the main street, Murrumbeena Road, trying to seduce the greengrocer's son. He was 16. And my mother found out, And I'll never forget when she talked to me. I mean, she's only 5'2", so I must have been quite little then. I'm only 5 foot now, so I must have been little because I was looking up at her. I remember she said, "And you have the audacity." And I hadn't heard that word before. And I used to read books and I was thinking to myself, audacity, how do you spell that? O-R-D. I was trying to work out how you spell audacity. You have the audacity, she said. So she sent me off to boarding school. She freaked out, because I was so naughty. So, but I remember when I went to boarding school, I was 13, 14, did my last 2 years at school. I didn't finish school. I left when I was 15 or something. I didn't do high school, didn't finish. Anyway, all I know is I was in heaven. I had my own, we're in a dormitory, a Catholic convent. I didn't even have a bedroom, but I had an alcove with kind of walls and a curtain. I was in heaven. And then we had mass. I'd go to mass every single morning, 7 mornings a week. I was in heaven. I had discipline for the first time. I had my own desk. I studied. I passed exams for the first time. I was in heaven. I became a saint overnight. And what changed was nothing except the conditions. So even though the mind is the point, this is such a huge, important thing. We don't think of it in our culture. The mind is the point, but you've got to have the right conditions to enable the mind to grow. So there I was, this wicked, out of control person, because the conditions were outrageous. I'm not blaming anybody. 7 other dynamic human beings, all struggling for space, all struggling to find our own way, with a dysfunctional family, and my darling mummy and darling daddy, whom I adore, doing their trips and, whatever, human nature. It was insanity. It was chaos, complete chaos, my memory of it. We didn't know. My mother was a hopeless housekeeper. She was a musician, so she taught music to help bring in the money, because my father used to spend it on playing snooker and whatever. It doesn't matter, whatever. But I mean, we were hopeless, and the clothing in our bedroom would pile up to about almost the same height. We had an outside lavvy. We call it a lavvy, a lavatory, a lavvy, so we'd have a pot. So the pot would tip over. We'd write all over the walls. We're very artistic. All the walls were covered in writing. The house was chaos. So everything was chaotic on the external. So as soon as I went to school, went to boarding school, my own little place, my own bed, my own space, it was bliss. I discovered my mind for the first time. I discovered my own thoughts. I discovered my own potential. It was like a miracle. Okay, well, interestingly, and I find this fascinating, all the social workers would be most upset. I mean, if we'd had social workers come into our family, we would have all been thrown into orphanages, But all my mother sent 4 of us to boarding school, and every one of them hated it. They would run away from boarding school. They cry and want to go home. So there we are, this totally dysfunctional environment, but they preferred that to living in boarding school. But I was in heaven. I loved boarding school. So what I'm getting at is, don't wait till you're with your boyfriend, until you're with your children, until you're with your people at work to work on your mind. That's the commonest question we ask. When I'm having a fight with my boyfriend, what will I do? That's an idiotic question. You've got to do some work on your own first. You've got to learn to watch your mind, do some meditation, do a bit of practice morning and night, at least morning and night, at least 10 minutes each time. Begin, kind of put bookends on your day, and make some, do a bit of meditation, do a bit of just whatever, reading a few little aspirations, doing a little visualization, doing a few mantras. That's your practice. And you make some decisions. I'm going to watch myself tomorrow. And that's why at the end of the day is such a powerful time. And we do this purification practice. Lama Zopa says we're insane not to do it every day. But even if you don't do something formally like that, it's like a little kind of check up on the day. You check up, you check up. I know in the first, the check up on the day, we carry on all day and we kind of get exhausted and wonder why we're so stressed out, because at 11 o'clock you kick the dog and at 1 o'clock you shout at your husband, but you didn't deal with it then, because we don't know how to deal with it, because we don't have techniques. So at the end of the day, you clean up your act, you do your little purification, you regret your rubbish, you have compassion, you do a little practice, and you vow to change, and you make a decision at the end of the day before you go to sleep. You know tomorrow you're going to be spending 3 hours with that particular person at work you can't stand. You're going to have to spend all day in the same room as your boyfriend. So you really know all the trouble areas. So you make some decisions, because if you don't make decisions, you won't do something. If you don't intend to do it, you won't do it. So you make a decision. Tomorrow, I'm going to watch my speech like a hawk. I promise myself I will, for 24 hours, be controlling my speech. And you wake up in the morning and you remember your decision. This is really practical. This is practical advice. This is practical psychology. This is practice, full stop. The wisdom wing is internal. The wisdom wing is you. It's the best way to do it is the retreat mode. Go up to the mountains, do retreat, put yourself together to some degree. Now you can come down and do the compassion wing, easy, falling off a log, But we don't have time. We don't consider it appropriate in our culture. We don't even think about it like that. Okay, we do these days. We talk about having time for yourself. You know, you need it. But we've got to budget it into your day, not as some kind of luxury, but as a necessity, because that's when you do your internal work. Do your work, see your mind, be your own therapist. And more you do that, you know, we don't think like this in our culture either. When we, you know, the way we work on our mind is by going to a therapist and helping sort us out. Okay, do that. But you can do your own work as well, internally. Get to know your own mind intimately. This is the exact job of being a Buddhist, actually. It's not just hit and miss and cross your fingers and wait for the vomit to come out the mouth before you realize you've got to start working on your mind before it gets to the mouth. That's the skill. That's what the wisdom ring is about. So it's necessary. And that's why, you know, one of the classes we had, someone said, you know, who was it? Roz in Australia, I think. Yeah, Roz in Australia. She said, you know, when you're on your own, you really, in the normal world, normal people have been talking this way about COVID-19, you get totally depressed. You go crazy because we don't normally consciously spend time on our own. We think it's called mental illness to spend time on your own. And then when we do spend time on our own, because we don't know what to do with our mind because we've never looked at it. This is why this has been a marvelous opportunity for anybody who's trying to know their own mind. You've been forced into a retreat mode. It's fantastic. And that's why most people in prisons go crazy. My friends in prisons, you know, in top security go nuts until they learn techniques of what to do with your mind. And then you don't mind being on your own, because when your mind is there, you know what to do with it. This sounds so simple and corny, but it's utterly profound. I mean, as Lama Zopa says, you know, the vast majority of all humans on this planet have no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their lives. I mean, that really sounds like you can't believe it when you hear it, but it's true. Because from the second we wake up in the morning, we know this. Until the second we go to sleep at night, what are we focused on? The object of the senses, which is the external world by definition, because the senses are the interface between me and everything else, isn't it? So the senses play a huge role in our lives, but we don't pay attention to the mental consciousness, the thoughts that respond to the sensory things, the thoughts that respond to the husband and the this and the television and the that and the road and all the rest. That's our job. And because we've got about 1,000 thoughts a second, we don't pay attention to the thoughts until they become roaring emotions. And that's too late. So you have to practice seeing your thoughts before they become emotions. That is the simplest way of saying what being a Buddhist means. A big surprise to us. That's why I think we have a lot of misconceptions about meditation. I mean, Buddha doesn't own the word meditation. He's not a creator. Anyone can use it. Anyone can have their own definition. There's no problem. And there are 59 varieties on the planet. Nothing wrong. But we just are naive and assume because a person says meditation, we all assume it's the same thing. No. There are 57 varieties of the word mindfulness now. This is one, you see, the thing in Buddhism about the mind is interesting. As we've talked often, you've got 3 categories of states of mind. All the neurotic, deluded, ridiculous, I-based, fear-based, ridiculous states of mind that are the source of your pain. Then the valid, virtuous, reasonable, positive, appropriate, beneficial, marvelous states of mind that are the source of your happiness. And that already is a distinction we don't make in our culture. And the third lot are the parts of your mind that enable you to do anything properly. They're like the mechanics of your mind: intention, attention, concentration, good memory, discrimination. There are many, many parts of your mind that actually you develop to an incredible degree, that you hone to an incredible degree in the Buddhist concentration technique called calm abiding. That's what the world vaguely knows as mindfulness. But people, psychology these days use it, but I've seen all the different definitions of it, and it's absolutely not the Buddhist definition, that's for sure. That's okay. But don't be naive and assume because a person says that word, you've got the same definition. We know there are words that are the same, spelt the same, sound the same, but have got totally different definitions. Like in Australia and England, we used to live in flats. Now we're more American. We live in apartments, you know, but we used to live in a flat. Maybe still in England, you live in a flat. So then let's say you've never heard of the geometric shape called flat. And someone says, and points to a table and said, that's flat, you'll get very depressed. You mean I have to live there? No, it's a different meaning. Same word, same sound, but different meaning. So we should check our terms, check our definitions, So mindfulness for the Buddha is a word that actually refers to the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. So as Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. Well, I remember a fellow who was a mindful, a Vipassana Buddhist. Vipassana is just a type of meditation Buddha teaches, but there's people who almost exclusively have, do Vipassana as almost like its own religion now. It's okay. But he was so insulted, he left the course and wrote to the center and complained that I was being sectarian because I'd said thieves need mindfulness, because I was insulting it. No, it's because of our misconception of what mindfulness means. It's the mechanics of our mind. It's simply the ability to remember what you're doing moment by moment. So if you make a cake and you forget whether you put the flour or the eggs in, you're in trouble. It's obvious. That's when you get Alzheimer's, because you've lost your mindfulness. Literally, that part of your mind no longer works. You can't remember things moment by moment. This is crucial. That's trained in this type of meditation. So what I'm getting at is, now I forget why I started. What I'm getting at roughly, I think, is, we have these misconceptions about meditation. So first of all, there's hundreds and thousands of techniques, even in Buddhism, but you can divide them all into two main modes, two main divisions. One kind is under the first division, which is actually called, in terms of its result, and it's called calm abiding. It's the term in Tibetan, in Sanskrit, shamatha. So what it's referring to when you've achieved it, that's the end result. What it's referring to is an incredibly subtle, laser-like, subtle state of concentration. That's it. So I don't call that religion. That's psychological. And there's nothing like it in the West, nothing like it in neuroscience, nothing like it in modern psychology. This is made up by these genius Indians more than 3,000 years ago, even before the Buddha. This incredibly sophisticated capacity to get your mind to a more subtle level of cognition, where it's single-pointed effortlessly. All we can do is describe what it would be like if you had it, because there's nothing equivalent in our culture. And we can't even imagine it because it's a state of mind that doesn't depend upon the brain, and nothing like that exists in our modern culture. It's a level of mind that's beyond conceptuality and beyond the sensory, that we don't even posit such a thing in our culture. So we can't even imagine. And when you read, like in Lama Yeshe, very rarely the lamas will go on and rave on about how marvelous it is, some of the qualities you accomplish if you had it. But Lama Yeshe would like to get us excited. He was amazing when he first started teaching in the early 70s. You can't imagine some of the qualities you'd have. He talks about it in his Mahamudra book. Unbelievable, beyond what we would imagine are possible. So what I'm getting at is this forget the long-term result, it's like a bonus. The point of it is to get the mind to be focused to whatever degree. So even if 5 minutes of trying this out every day, you might not, you probably, most of us, 99% of us won't in this life give up sex, drugs and rock and roll and go to a serious retreat mode, which is literally and metaphorically in the mountains, where you'd spend 1, 2, if not more years getting this skill. Most of us won't do that. Lots are doing it right now. People looking like you and me, white people, European people, Western people, right this second, accomplishing it. It's a living technique, hasn't died out yet. So what do you want it for? What do you want it for? It's got its own results. It's unbelievable. Like Lama talks, it tries to get us excited. It's got incredible results, but like the bonus, which also give us courage because it shows us how marvelous our mind is, what the potential of our mind is when it's utterly under control. But the purpose of this concentration, to whatever degree you get it, is so that you can do the second mode. That's where the work is done. Try and pack and unravel and deconstruct the chaos in here. Again, to a degree of control and subtlety that we can't even imagine is possible in modern science. This is Buddha's genius, And why do you want to do that? Because what goes on in our mind is the main source of our misery and our happiness. So it's clear that's what we've got to work on. So like I'm saying, this is the retreat mode. This is the wisdom wing. This is the retreat mode. You can't just do that while you're in the middle of watching the dishes. You can't do that while you're watching the television, because you focus on the outside then. We've got to find ways so we can focus on the inside. The first one is to control the mind. so that you can do the second mode, which is then do the work of investigating what's in the mind. They call that meditation insight, but don't make it fancy. You know what insight means? You go, oh, you're thinking about a problem, you go, oh, I got a bit of insight into that. It means you understand something. So here we're not trying to understand, tennis and cooking. We need insight into those too, and we're good at that. We're trying to get insight into what the hell is going on in our own crazy mind. But we assume that chaos is normal. We assume that this unconscious, we almost romanticize this weird mind of ours as unconscious. When weird things pop up and you have weird dreams, we kind of mystify it, No, it's like we're living in a state of total chaos all the time. It seems to me a miracle we all don't go completely mad because we don't have techniques to help work with it. So one of the major misconceptions about this kind of meditation, vaguely known as mindfulness, is that, excuse me, sniffing, is that because we don't pay attention to it until it's roaring out the mouth, until you're shaking with fear or anger or resentment or jealousy, and of course everything's vomiting out the mouth. Or if you don't have a tendency to vomit out the mouth, you internalize it and now you are inert in bed and profoundly depressed. Then at each case, you're either vomiting it all out or inert, and you're going, wow, what's going on? I must be depressed. Wow, what's going on? I want to kill my husband. That's completely too late. So then it's only then that we hear about a thing called meditation. So one of our biggest misconceptions is because when we know how bad it is, no, the biggest misconception is we think it's an alternative to a pill. In other words, if I'm having a blissful life and everything's wonderful, the kids are all gorgeous and the hubby's wonderful and we love each other and everything's wonderful, the food's good, the money's good, the house is good, the weather's good, and someone says you should learn to meditate, you say, what for? But I'm happy, why should I? This is proving how we think. It's proving we think that meditation is when when you're going crazy. We leave it till then. We leave it till then before we go to a therapist. So we think it's an alternative to a pill, an alternative to therapy. Then, because the pain is so bad, we then definitely think that it'll make all the pain go away. It'll make all the crazy thoughts go away. These are the misconceptions, and it's not any of those. It's very simple. So, of course, when you've got shamatha, when you've got single point of concentration, when you've got some semblance of control over your mind, yeah, the mind will be more subdued. But don't hold your breath, please. That's not even the goal. So, people, you don't think that when you sit down, and that's exactly what happens. We sit down and I'm going to watch my breath, we think, because, you've got to focus on something to anchor your mind to something. It just makes it useful. So then the mind, what you notice is, but my mind's even worse. My mind's crazy, as if that's a failure. No, it's not a failure. That's a sign of success. You've now finally noticed your mind. They even say in the text, in the ancient Indian texts, one of the signs of success of doing concentration meditation is that you think your mind's getting worse. No, you're noticing it. And that is good. Why? Because to think the thoughts will go away is beyond naive. They're ancient. Buddha would say they're from countless beginningless lifetimes. And that's pretty insane for us, I agree. They're not just something we picked up overnight. They're deeply ingrained habits in our mind. We've created conceptuality. We've created we've got these deep habits of thinking certain ways. And when the thoughts are really strong, they become emotional. So emotional is the tip of the iceberg. Emotional is the grossest expression of the thoughts deep in our bones. And that's what we have to learn to become familiar with. The thoughts deep in our bones, beneath the emotions that inform the emotions. So it's obvious you don't wait till the emotion comes to then check the thoughts that inform it. That's too late. Simple, really simple. It's just too late. Like I always joke, but it's true. It's like you've never heard of mechanics, and you never think that you just think your car's the way it is, and you never notice anything. And then one day at 120 miles an hour on the freeway, you notice your wheels are falling off. Oh, I better go. And you don't even know there's a mechanic. And what do I do? We say. That's how we think. That's when we notice our thoughts, when it's too late, when everything's berserk. It's just too late. Best you can do, damage control, sure. But try not to kill your husband. But it's way too late to notice. That's what practice every day is. That's the wisdom wing. So it's obvious, like for me as a child, I'd never heard, my mother didn't know those techniques. I mean, I was a Catholic. I was in love with God. I had all those methods. But, I didn't know how to control my thoughts. I had no idea how to control my body. As soon as I felt something, it came out the mouth or my fist did something. No methods at all to control. Not possible. So because we don't have the luxury of the right conditions, where you can have some space on your own and work on your mind. That's the reason to have space on your own. If we don't have that luxury, we've got to make sure we find it, because you're not going to survive otherwise, And that's where attachment gets us in the way. When we have enormous attachment, some people have massive attachment to be around other people. Huge neediness to be around other people, can't bear being on their own. They call it loneliness. So think of it. When we look at this deepest attachment, the deepest attachment, way more subtle than attachment to sex and drugs and rock and roll. And that's people who are attached to being around other people, people who get lonely on their own. That's this attachment, which we've all got. Some have it more than others. Attachment is this assumption that on my own, my thoughts on my own are just not valuable. It's only when I'm informed, when I'm with other people and they smile back at me and they reinforce me and they approve of me, that proves that I must be okay. So I need to have that all the time. We all need it all the time, but some people are worse than others, more obviously. So then we'll never spend a single second looking at our mind, because we're living in this schizophrenic way. And I mean, yes, you would say it that way, so don't be insulted. We've got no sense of our own self. We're completely disconnected from other people. So we only know what we're thinking, and we only know about ourselves in reference to others. So when someone smiles at me, it gives me the courage to think, oh, wow, I must have said the right thing. I must be an okay person. But in other words, we have zero feeling that I'm worthy, zero understanding of our own mind, because we all the time need other people to affirm us, to reaffirm us, to smile at us, to praise us. This is really serious mental illness. And we just think it's normal in the West. So we'll never give space to our own self. And when we have our space on our own, then we have it. We're forced, like now, COVID-19, or you go to prison. You don't know what to do with it. That's why people go mad. And we assume in our culture, it's totally normal to go mad when you're on your own. We actually think that psychologically. I mean, this shows, with respect, how idiotic we must be in our psychology, in our culture, with respect. We don't even know how to be whole, content, fulfilled people on our own. It's just that itself sounds schizophrenic. That itself sounds mentally ill. I mean, we really look at this. We should look at this, We've got to know our own, we've got to become our own friend, know our own mind intimately, know our qualities, know our tendencies, know our good ones and our bad ones, and work on them. And it's too late to try and work on them while you're in the kitchen with your child or in the kitchen with your boyfriend. You've got to do that on your own. Then that's the wisdom wing. And then when you're with others, that's for them. This is why most of us are not qualified to be in relationships. We haven't done the inner work. So we run around trying to have a relationship full of attachment and neediness and jealousy and anger, and wonder why we go crazy and kill each other. We don't even know how to be compassionate. We don't even know how to be with others properly. With others, that's the compassion wing. When you're on your own, you work on your mind. When you're with others, your body and speech is for them. That's a brand new idea to us. And so we haven't done any wisdom wing work. We are not qualified to have valid relationships, because we're sitting there all needy, wanting the other person to love me, wanting the other person to be doing things, grasping like a vampire at the other person, waiting for them to act and behave nicely so I know I must be an okay person. That's not useful. The other person's feeling the same. So you've got two demented, self-loathing people propping each other up. I mean, no wonder we all go crazy. I mean, I can't imagine it. And we think we've got healthy relationships. I wonder why we don't have, because we haven't done the inner work. We don't even know what that means. These days, a bit more. There's a few more decent therapists around. That's for sure. I mean, it's so bizarre to think you're not worthy unless you're with others. If you're not worthy, why would you dump yourself on another poor, unsuspecting person? Holy God. Think about that. Or my thoughts are so, loneliness is I've got no one to share my thoughts with. And you don't think they're enough when you're just having them on your own. If you don't think your thoughts are enough when you're on your own, what do you want to have other people share them with you for? If they're such horrible thoughts. I mean, it's very demented, but this is how we think. We're very peculiar. What Buddha's saying is everything we are is already there. We have to discover it and nurture it and nourish it and grow it and become it. Then we can have valid relationships with other people. Then we can have marvelous relationships. And then you won't be needy. You'll have people crawling all over you. They will love you and adore you. And you won't be needing it. But even that is suspect in our culture. We think you're mentally ill if you don't need other people. We think you're selfish or autistic. That greeter girl, that one who goes around the world, that greeter girl, she said, I don't need other people like other people do. People think she's mentally ill, and they give a label for it. In our culture, it's called autistic. Very peculiar. Got any questions, people?
Venerable Robina, I have 2 questions in the chat.
Good. Okay, talk to me.
So the first one is from Ada, and she's asking about a definition of insanity, and she wants to check her conclusion that she thinks we're all mentally ill.
Thank you very much. Yes, Buddha agrees, honey. This is very shocking, but I want to spell it out. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm going to spell it out, the logic for this. You are exactly right. Okay, this is where we look at the Buddha's view of the mind, and he distinguishes, as we've discussed, into 3, every millisecond of every thought in your mind. We divide into 3 categories. This is quite unique to the Buddha. There are those that are I-based, which are necessarily delusional, disturbing, fear-based, frantic, not reasonable, painful, the cause of our suffering and the cause of why we harm others, and they're called ego grasping, which gives rise to attachment, which gives rise to anger, and all the other thousands. They are called in classic Indian, Sanskrit, the term for these states of mind, or the second lot, are valid, reasonable, kindness, love, compassion, enjoy, generosity, forgiveness, the good ones, the valid ones. So we give equal status to these in our culture, don't we? And we assume you'd be a normal person has a little bit of everything. But we mean by normal that you'd be abnormal if you didn't have some of those. Well, the Buddha, his whole entire view is based on his own experience, the end result of his work, which is that you can get rid of the rubbish ones, and they're not at the core of our being. This is quite literal. These words are not complicated, but this is very shocking if we consider neuroscience and modern psychology. That's Buddha's point. So the term in Sanskrit for these is the simple word affliction. Look up the dictionary. Affliction is something like a problem. So we've got 2 kinds of afflictions, haven't we? We've got mental affliction. We've got general, you're afflicted with problems. You could have horrible husbands and lousy weather. You could argue a bit that way. But usually it's personal. It's either a physical, which is sickness and pain, or it's mental. So at least Geshe Sopa, one wonderful Tibetan Lama who was invited by His Holiness to come to the West in the 60s, one of the first Tibetan Lamas to become, and he went to Wisconsin, and he was a professor at the university there, and he passed away a few years later, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, something. One Lama Yeshe Lama Zopa's main teachers. So he, at least in his Lamrim literature, he translated as mental affliction, which is getting closer to what it is. And affliction is too broad, and it's not a word we use in our culture, is it? It's rather arcane. Yet Buddhists use it because His Holiness translates it. Of course, it's the typical word. Oh, I have an affliction, the afflictions, Who uses that in the world? Nobody. And Lama Yeshe just knew this back in the 70s when he met all the Westerners who were hippies. He just knew. So I know when I edit his books, he never used the word affliction because he knows it's a dumb word. In my opinion, a dumb word. It's just old-fashioned. So what's another word for it? Let me read out Lama's terms. Oh, I can't, doesn't matter. He's got a whole bunch, try and get us to understand what they are. So, but if we look at the word affliction, mental affliction, an affliction is an illness, isn't it? An illness. We say, oh, I've got an illness. I'm so sorry. You had an illness, Robina. Please, how can I help you? Can I give you a pill? And then I'll say, no, it's what kind of illness, Robina? Well, it's a mental illness. And you'll be shocked and want to keep away from me because a mental illness has got a powerful meaning in our culture, has it not? It's a very shocking term. Nobody would ever admit to mental illness. It sounds so concrete. It's like you become kind of leper. You'd never say it. It's a very shocking concept. But the literal meaning, if you unpack affliction, Buddha's not, he's not dealing with, physical sickness. He's dealing with mental. And it's called a mental illness. There are one word that's commonly used, delusion, which is quite good in English. And it's pointing to a particular characteristic of these afflictions, these mental illnesses. That is that they're misconceptions deeper down when we really start to see them, when they're misconceptions that lead us up garden paths. So that's why they cause suffering, which is a whole thing we have to learn by investigating our minds. The other one is the disturbing emotions. It's a good term they use, disturbing, very clear. Look at anger, jealousy, depression. So yes, you are absolutely right. And I say this repeatedly and not as a joke. We are all, okay, make the sentence bigger. Buddha's saying, to the extent to which we have any of the root delusion, ego grasping, which is so primordial that in our culture we don't even label it, on the basis of that wrong sense of a separate, neurotic, panic-stricken, fear-based I, we then it gives rise to this intense bottomless pit of emotional hunger called attachment to get what the I wants. Then anger, aversion, frustration, irritation, annoyance, all the way to despair and depression when it doesn't. And then all this builds up. These are the three main afflictions, the three poisons, then they give rise to all the others. So they are these mental illnesses, these afflictions. And yes, to the degree that we have any of these is the degree that we are mentally ill. It's a really accurate phrase. It's just shocking to our ears, but we have to understand what he means by it. In other words, we know if you're a junkie, that is a mental illness, or you want to jump on 14 boys every day. People now calling it an illness, and rather than just being a naughty person who goes, sent to hell. That's attachment, out of control attachment. So it's only when you want to that degree of attachment, we think then you've got a problem. But normal attachment for us in the world, we factor it in to a normal human being because we don't have a view that you can be rid of it. So we've got very different levels of normality. Buddha's normal. The baseline for Buddha is being a Buddha. You're mentally ill until you become a Buddha, basically. You're limited until you become a Buddha. You've still got delusions all the way to achieving realization emptiness, achieving your own liberation, so he's got a much more dramatic, more profound, more subtle, more nuanced level understanding of what we can accomplish with our mind. That's the way to put it. So yes, you're absolutely right. We're all mentally ill. Next question.
The next one is an anonymous question, and it says, even after a week's retreat, when I'm doing meditation, when I come home, I feel like I'm moving slower while everything around me is moving faster. Is it because I'm more calm? What is that about?
No, I don't think. If you're more calm, you wouldn't notice other. It's possible. Well, no, excuse me. It is a possibility, of course. If you've been sitting quietly, if you've been sitting and just forget about meditation. If you've been in a really quiet place for a long time, where you can hear the birds and the pretty sounds, then suddenly you find yourself waking up in the middle of a freeway or a screaming football field of 100,000 people, you'll be a bit shocked. Loud and noisy. Yeah, of course, cars speeding around. But that in the beginning is that's a very typical one. That's very typical. When we're fairly new practitioners, we become familiar with the retreat mode, and it's very special, and we get quite sensitive, and we get quite subtle, and it's marvelous. So when we enter into the world again, it can be quite shocking. But the more we practice, I think, the more we adjust our mind, the more we develop bodhicitta and compassion, we won't find a difference, because the calm in the mind is so stable, nothing externally can distress it. Nothing can disturb it. So in the beginning, we're still a bit fragile, I'd say. So as we keep going, if we're really working on our mind properly, including compassion, not just working on the wisdom wing, but also developing compassion. If we're mainly focused on the wisdom wing, then it will be very distressing to be around other people. We won't be able to cope. But if we added compassion to the mix, when we bring home out of retreat and we also bring our compassion and we realize everybody else is suffering as well, that they won't be disturbing to us. It'll just move our hearts and make us wish to practice more. So we just have to watch your own experiences. What else? Anything else?
Yes, I have one more, Venerable Robina.
Yeah, good, please.
The question is, how would one explain the person totally enjoying the aloneness and its beauty, but getting more socially detached? Is it normal?
No, it is normal, but it's selfish. That's not the method for that's not the result. That's not the desired result of the wisdom wing. The desired result of the wisdom wing is that you work on not just enjoy the quiet and enjoy the blah, 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 and enjoy the space, especially if you're a mum. I mean, I think of my darling mother with her 7 children all her life and her crazy husband and trying to teach all the music and clean up the messy house and run the family business because my father wasn't so good at it. I mean, for her to have one day of quiet would have been a beyond luxury. You know, she probably would have slept for 24 hours. But the point, so that you need it if you've been really frantic. People who live in these working crazy jobs desperately need some quiet. But I'm just talking not just as a relief from all the noise, but as a necessary space in order to do the work on the mind, not just enjoy it. That's not the point. That's not the point. It's to use it to do the work on the mind. It's so important. In a conference recently in Sydney, I was on the Zoom, and one of the comment was a panel, and we all discussing this point about, and I was saying we need the wisdom wing, and I was trying to explain the Buddhist approach. Then the other people interpreted it as having space on your own. The other people all interpret it, which is how we interpret it in the West. And I'm not suggesting you're exactly saying this, that we need to take time for ourselves, meaning to relax, look at the sky. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about really intense inner work. Getting concentration, learning Buddhist psychology, observing your mind, doing your practice every day, because it's a real hands-on job of actual hard work, not just enjoying the space. So if it's just enjoying the space, then you become more socially distant. You're not doing the job properly. You're just becoming a more self-centered person. And that is a lot of people are like that. Totally self-centered, don't care about other people. That's not the result at all. To be more socially disconnected is not, if you are, then you're going in the wrong direction. As I said from the other person, even just a week's retreat, if you're doing it properly, adding compassion to the mix, when you become less attached and less angry and less jealous and less neurotic from working on your mind, you become more loving, more empathetic and more compassionate and more content to be around other people because you're more qualified to be of benefit to others. So we've got to really understand the purpose of the wisdom wing, understand the internal mode, understand the retreat mode. It's not merely enjoying. It's not merely having a break from the chaos, although we need that. It's full on hard work. Having your hands in your own shit, as a friend of mine said. It's full on work, seeing your own mind and working on it. I know that's peculiar to us in the West. We don't even understand that, actually. So it's an intensely difficult job. That's the wisdom wing. Then you're qualified to be with other people appropriately. That's the point. That's a really good question. Thank you. What else?
And Robina, I have 4 more questions now.
Good. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So the first one is, she's asking, is it possible to achieve the insight here being the ability to not be mentally ill? Is it possible to achieve that insight within the fires of a stormy relationship?
No, that's what what I'm trying to say is this. This is my point. Within that relationship, which is most people in the world have relationships with bosses, mummies, daddies, sisters, beloveds, children. Everything's fiery to one degree or another because dynamics of humans are pretty fiery. So everyone's going to have a relationship, but you've got to take the time for the wisdom wing. If you don't know your own mind properly from doing meditation every day and doing your prostrations and doing your purification practices morning and night, if you don't take that time to make decisions and know yourself well, you will not be able to handle the fire of that relationship. You'll be either one of the dead women or the one who kills her. That's not a joke. This is the point. How can you go and play Wimbledon if you haven't practiced on the back courts first? How can you go play, a concert in the Albert Hall or the Carnegie Hall if you haven't done your years and years of intense practice on your own, perfecting your skill? And here the skill is your mind. We don't even talk like this in the West. We don't even know what it means in the West. It's a very sophisticated job to do, to learn to control it, to harness the crazy energy of your mind, to know it intimately and well and begin to be in control of it. That's the wisdom wing. Then you will be able to handle the fiery relationship. Then it won't be so fiery. That's the point. Because you'll be different. You'll be different. Just now somebody emailed, he's doesn't matter what country he's in, he's got a loud, bossy wife. He's got a loud, noisy wife. I mean, I'm not being real sexist here. All just different people. And he's kind of got fairly low key and kind of controlled. But when he gets angry, he explodes really quickly. That's what happens with some people. So first I said to him, first you've got to decide, is this the right relationship? If it's not the right place to be, get the hell out, please. That's the first decision we have to make. Is this job worthwhile? Having the boss abuse me every day? You've got to decide. So if you decide there's some worthwhile in that relationship, if you decide it's worth the effort, then you have to do the inner work yourself. So I said to this person, you have to find space to do your own practice morning and night. You have to find space to change your mind, to understand your own attachment. That's why you get angry, to understand your own anger. Don't blame her. It's your anger. Your fire is your fire and your partner's is their fire. Put the two together, we can't even distinguish between them. This is our problem. And then I said, when you're with her, and she starts to, chat away like she might, interpret it differently. Instead of because what's happening now is you maybe want a bit of peace and quiet because it's your mind, but yet your attachment suddenly isn't getting what it wants when she's blah, blah, blah. Maybe she's mad at you or something, maybe you did something wrong. First, check you did something wrong. But second, interpret her words differently. As long as you keep thinking, I wish she wasn't saying these words. Well, I wish she wasn't saying these words, and you're repressing yourself. That's called anger. And 1 minute it will come exploding out the mouth. So interpret it differently. And then I said, and be kind to her, and thank her, and love her, and praise her. And before you know it, first of all, you will have painted a new picture of this woman. But second, because you're different, she will be different. It's interdependent. So the wisdom wing is knowing your part of it, and work on that on your own. Don't own her part of it. We dump onto each other. So you can't, in the middle of a relationship, shouting and yelling, you can't possibly tell which is hers and which is yours. Not possible if you haven't done the wisdom wing work, if you haven't got your space every morning and every night for your practice. And if you can't handle that relationship before you kill each other, get the bloody hell out, please. Get out of it. That's intelligence. We are like little vampires clinging to each other, hoping it'll change, and before you know it, you're dead. We are ridiculous. Have some intelligence, have some self-respect. What else?
The next question I have, Venerable Robina, is how is the worth of a person determined? Wouldn't the worth be the same as any other sentient being?
Yes, finally. The Buddha would say, every one of us, every Hitler, every Mother Teresa, every ant, every dog, every hell being, every Mr. Trump, fundamentally, their mind is the same. It's got the same nature. It's not physical. Everyone has the same potential to become Buddha. Everyone wants to be happy. Everyone doesn't want to suffer. That's the fundamental, absolute similarity. On that basis, yes. Then each of us is different based on our own habits and our own karma. So some come out like maniacs, some come out like saints, and all variations in between. So yes, we are all fundamentally worthwhile. But then it's all a question of how much potential you've got at that moment. We've all got the same potential, but each of us is at different levels of ability to grow that potential. So while the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas had this infinite compassion for everyone, recognizing this point. But we've got to be more intelligent and more skillful. You can't just say, well, you got a psychotic husband who beats you up every day. Oh, he's really worthwhile, and let him punch you every day. That's idiocy. The poor man can't help it. He's out of control with his delusions. Get the hell out of his way before he kills you, if you have the luxury to do that. So of course we're all worthwhile fundamentally, but that's not meant to be some nihilistic absolute. We've all different components. We've all got different practices due to past karma. There's a crazy person, a lying person, a stealing person, a loving person. So we've got to know where we are at, sort ourselves out first, and then we can be of benefit to others. Compassion wing. Yeah.
We have another question. Someone is asking, what does it mean exactly when, I'm reading it here, sorry, when you say that you're creating merit working for a Dharma center?
No, that's a good point. Thank you very much. All these kind of Buddhist words, isn't it? You should analyze them. One simple way of describing the entire job of what you're doing day by day, second by second, is we're pulling out the weeds and growing the flowers until eventually you've become a Buddha, which is a person who has perfected their mind, as abstract as that might sound to us. That means a mind that's, the weeds have all gone, and there's only the virtues, there's only goodness and wisdom and clarity and joy and compassion, all the flowers, in other words. So our job, so there's two terms they use. Some practices have a particular component that's excellent for pulling out the weeds. They're called purification. Some practices are really good for growing the flowers. They're called creating merit. So just terms they've used over the centuries coming from India. So we need to define them properly. And of course, this is like psychology. These are not holy things. I mean, they are holy, but they're psychological. So some practices are specifically geared to helping put atomic bombs under the habits and the tendencies and the rubbish. Purification practices. And some practices are like nourishment on the flowers, nourishment and fertilizer on the flowers and on the veggies and things. So because the way all the lamas say, in general, due to karma, the whole law of karma is in general the main factor that determines. Excuse me, I have to blow my nose. The main factor in general, every second, that determines the character of the action you do, and we're doing actions of body, speech, and mind every millisecond. The main factor that determines the character of that action, that is to say, the main factor that determines whether it's a so-called negative action or a positive one, and therefore determines the seed that you plant in your mind, which therefore determines the result, which is your future experience, happiness or suffering. The main factor isn't even the action, but is what motivates you to do the action, the reason behind it. So a negative action generally is one that harms another. And what makes it negative is your anger or your attachment. A positive action, in this case, now getting close to your question, is an action that benefits another. And what makes it really beneficial for you, let's say you do an action of generosity to someone, you give them $50. They're blissfully happy because they're poor. So the result of their joy isn't much to do with your virtue. It's your motivation. So if that person's rich and you just want to impress them and want them to love you, then you almost created no virtue at all because your motivation was mostly attachment. They're happy with their $50. But what makes your action itself virtuous, or you to be doing an action that creates merit, that puts flowers in your garden or nourishes your flowers, is the intensity of your motivation, your genuine generosity or your genuine compassion. That is what makes it a very powerful, virtuous action. That you create merit. Now, the lamas say, certain actions we do that are done in relation to what they refer to as very potent, very powerful objects of our action, because of their connection, so like a Dharma center is a place where you help people's minds. That's its bottom line. You don't learn tennis in a Dharma center. You could, that's not the point. The point is to help people change their minds. The point is to help people, work on their minds and then eventually become a Buddha, blah, blah. So that's its function. So because that's such a powerful job, even the Lama Zopa would say, even giving a donation to that place, helping them help people's minds, because helping people's minds is the most powerful action you can do that brings the most long-term benefit. That's a very powerful, virtuous action from your side. Because of the power of, in other words, how much good your dollar does. It helps that place continue to help people's minds, and helping people's minds helps that one person help many other people. So it's very powerful because helping people's minds is the most marvelous way to help people. You can help, Lama Zopa said, you can give food to everybody on the planet. This is inconceivable virtue, but that only helps their body. But you give one piece of advice to one person that helps their mind, and they then become a Buddha eventually and can help countless millions of beings. It's just more long-term benefit. See, that's the answer. So I hope that helps maybe to think it through. And if it doesn't make sense, ask me again. That's the reasoning behind it. So as Lama Zopa says, just working for a place that helps other people's minds, labeled in this case by Buddhists as a Dharma center. Helping people's minds means helps them know their mind, help them change their mind, help them become enlightened long term, So working just for a day in a place like that, because of the power of that place and what the good it does is in terms of the amount of purification you accomplish and the amount of virtue you create or merit you create, the virtuous seeds you plant in your mind and the non-virtuous seeds you pull out because of the power of that job, is in just one day working there is equivalent to what you'd accomplish by doing years of retreat. That's what they say. So that's hopefully giving you some logic to think about. Time to go home. Any more questions?
There's one more in the
Okay,
chat
good.
box. This one, actually, I have two more.
Go.
So what would be your advice to a Buddhist practitioner currently on medication for clinical depression?
Sweetheart, use whatever methods you can to help you navigate your life. You'll be the boss of it. You observe. If there are some, nothing wrong with taking, we eat food because we need to be healthy. That's like a drug. Food's like a drug. It keeps us healthy. So we've got to but you eat too much food, you'll collapse, you won't be able to do anything. So if the drugs you take, if you notice that there's a downside, you have to weigh up whether the downside's better than the upside. You have to work it out. Just be reasonable, So anything we can take that helps us work with our mind. So the Buddhist way of putting it is this. We've got the body and we have the mind. So if you go to a Tibetan doctor, their analysis, which is based on the Vajrayana model, we've got these 72,000 subtle nervous system channels that course through our body, and coursing through those channels are these subtle wind energies, the prana. This is the basis of health. The Tibetan Buddhist doctors studied this for 12, 14 years. The Chinese doctors talk the same way. The Indians, in ancient history, we used to think this way a few centuries ago. Now we have a different model, don't we? The allopathic system. So the Tibetan one, you go to your Tibetan doctor, she will feel your pulses and she will feel this imbalance. So first of all, sorry to finish, this nervous system and all these different wind energies coursing through all this nervous system throughout our body, and all of our states of mind, this is clearly not our model, are linked to those wind energies. And every one of those wind energies, like your attachment has its own wind energies, your anger, your aversion, every part of our mental consciousness is inextricably linked to these different wind energies, and they're intimately connected. So if your Tibetan doctor will feel your pulses, and she'll feel this imbalance of certain wind energies that she knows are linked to your attachment. That's why you're having panic attacks, or that's why it's linked to your aversion. That's why you're having depression. So she will give you subtle herbs that will work on the wind energy, which is physical, which will then calm the winds down. So then the mind, as they say in Tibetan, that rides on those winds will become calm. So it's the same principle as when you go take your serotonin or whatever you take. It's the body and the mind. So the body for the Buddha depression is not physical. That's not the physical component. It's just the connection between the physical and the mental. So take whatever we need to calm the physical down, which will help our mind. So the Buddhist approach to taking your antidepressants, then you've got more space to begin to notice your mind. Because depression is very hard to see. It's the result of built up aversion, but at a subtle level, not like a volatile person like me who'd shout and yell. That's anger. But an internalized level of aversion, which is when attachment doesn't get what it wants, that's depression. And it's much more hard to notice it. Hope that helps.
The last question I have, Venerable Robina, is from Brian Harris. He's asking when you're going to write a book, Venerable Robina.
Never. I give all these talks, so they're on tapes, right? And because I speak 3 times the pace of everybody else, there'll be 3 more books there. If somebody wants to do it, it's your business. I want to use my skill of editing to do my teachers, my lama's jobs. And seeing that on next bloody Sunday, I'm going to be 76, I've got very little time left. So I'm not going to be writing a book. I can't be bothered. But if somebody wants to take my words and edit them, then I'm happy with that. You can do what you like. You can publish a whole library of them. Next Saturday, we were going to stop. But I think Charmaine's going to take me to Colorado next week, where Mary and Harry who nearly fell off the mountain, right? Mary's starting her long 3-year retreat soon, isn't it? So Harry's going to be her attendant. He's been usually the one doing the meditating. So we're going to go visit a few hours north of us here in Santa Fe. But I thought we could do it from there. We could do one more from there for a Christmas holiday, Christmas the 20th. What do you think, Charmaine?
I think I should check the internet connection, but I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, why don't we do it in the car on the way to Colorado? We can do that. So our final one, then we have a couple of weeks break. Okay. So let's aim for next Sunday as well. On the road to Colorado, whatever the song is. Okay, people.